on a weekly basis to answer any questions you might have. So feel free to type them in the comments on the different videos. It streams on both YouTube and Facebook right now, live. I try to bounce back and forth between them to make sure I catch comments on either. But give me a moment to get both the feeds up on my other screen so I can comments on either. But see what questions you guys have. All right, so YouTube's up. No, sorry, Facebook is up, and let's see about YouTube. There it is on YouTube. Okay, good morning. Fantastic. All right, so again, feel free to type in any questions you have. I have a handful that were sent in ahead of time, so I'm going to start there, and we'll kind of just go through. I hope everyone's having a good holiday. I'm ready for this week to be done. So let's see what we've got. Somebody posted that they are interested in getting Milka digitizing software. The only thing I can do is point you to the sales team. So if you go to melco.com, there is a chat window there that you can get in touch with someone there. There's also a number I put up on the screen. I got that straight off of melco.com's website. So if you go there, there's a contact form you can fill out. But you want to get in touch with the sales agents, and they can get you a quote and get you all set up with that. Okay. Let's see. What's the order of steps to producing a monogram on the EMT 16 Plus? So creating a monogram is pretty straightforward. As far as steps go, create your digitizing file, send it to the machine, and sew it. Hoop and sew. So it's pretty straightforward. If you've never created a monogram, there's a few different things that are available within the software for you. Okay, so I'm going to go create some lettering. There are some monogram fonts down here, and these are kind of fun. So if you've never used these, notice when you do the drop down on the different fonts, it's under monogram. Let's say this one. Oops, come back. Circle there. So you see the little code sheets that pop up? That's this little box, and you'll see like there's a circle with a number 1 under it, 2, 3, all of those are the borders around it. So let's say I want to do the style 4 border. Good morning, Lorena. -11. No, that is horrible. I'm in Florida and it's like 6. Let's see, what is it now? It's 57 and I'm dying. I'm so cold. -11, I can't fathom it. Enjoy it. Someone has to, not me. All right, so look at the number 4. So it's that circle with the little lines on it. So I'm going to click on this 3 little monogram, click on the screen anywhere, and CS. No, what is my monogram? SMC. I don't like that one. All right. That's okay. There you go. So hold shift to scale it to make it larger. So what did I do? I typed in the letters that you want for the monogram, and then I put the number 4, which is the border that I want. Now if you want to change it, you just change the number. So let's say you want the little half circles that are on number 5. Well, instead of 4, I put 5 and hit apply, and then you get that. So that's how you can get those different frames around that are built into the software. Now there are other ways you can create your monogram files rather than using these. You can of course type in your text and in whatever font you want, which I'm still in the circle one, so let's change it to something else. Okay, and then if you go into properties, there's this monogram thing here. If you turn it on, this is how you can make, all right, that's going to be a little bit too big. This is how you can make the different sizes of the different letters and still have it all one typable set of text. Good morning, Alexandra. All right, YouTube, nothing yet. Okay, so here you can change the different sizes. You can change the densities of each letter individually. Okay, and you'll see that creates it. Now, if you want to move these so they're positioned different, you would click on the text, click on that box, and now I can move it around. So if you want to position them different, notice it does keep it straight on the baseline. So if you want to move it up or down, you have to hold the control key on your keyboard, and that'll allow me to drag it around up or down. Okay, and then once I let go of the control, now it's locked back to the baseline again. So again, I can hold control to slide it up, and then, I don't know. Anyway, you can move it around holding control key. So this allows you to change the sizes independently, the densities independently of each of those letters. So once whatever font, whatever monogram you have, then you would want to send it to your machine. So you can go file, if you have, the Bravos don't do this, but if you've got one of the regular software versions and the EMTs type machines, you can go file, machine, load, design, or you can save it and go to your actual OS and just go load it, right? So go into your machine, load the file to it. You would hoop whatever garment you want and sew it out, set your colors. In this case, I have it set as a one color monogram. What if you want it multiple colors? I sometimes get that question. Well, let's say I want that one to be red and that one to be green. I can make it Christmassy. Okay, so all I'm doing is selecting the text, clicking on the box, and then selecting a color from my color palette over here. Okay, so you can change all the colors, and that way you can set multiple colors for your designs if you'd like. Okay, so monograms are really simple to do. I mean, once you get your file set up, it's just a matter of loading it to your machine and going. All right, let's see. Let me quick look on YouTube, see if there's any questions. None yet. All right. So what else do we have? Is it possible to do a chain stitch and or a moss stitch with DesignShop Pro Plus? I don't know what a moss stitch is. I quick Googled and saw a lot of pictures of moss, and my brain couldn't handle that, so I closed it. But I know what a chain stitch is, so let's look at that. So chain stitch, there's actually one built into the software. It's a decorative stitch. So if you want to, you would go create a walk input method, change your walk type to decorative, and then from there you can change it down to chain stitch. Okay, and now you digitize it just like you would a straight line. So left clicks are straight points, right clicks are curved points. When you're done, you hit enter. And obviously I'm way zoomed in, but there's a faux chain stitch. Now, let's say you want to change the properties of it. You wanted a longer chain or a narrower chain, something like that. Well, you can go double click on your element that you drew, and notice you'll have width and height and spacing. You can play with all these parameters. So let's say the width we want to be 75, or no, let's make that 125. And then maybe we want the height to be 75. You can play with them until you get the look that you're going for. So let's say this particular faux chain stitch isn't to your liking. Well, you can also create your own. So there's another question. Is it on the same one? No. So there was another question coming up here that's related, so I'll bounce back to the others. It's how do you create a decorative that is more than what's already built into the software, because they want to do something like this. So all of these are just working with your decorative, same with this. So let's dig a little bit more into those decoratives for you. All right. So let's say you want to create your own, and I drew one. So let's say we want to create our own beads. Well, first off, there is a bead already built in there. So if you don't want to create your own, you can always go to decorative, bead, and then draw whatever shape it is you want, right? So I'm just using my right clicks and there. Okay, then it's just a matter of changing the properties until you get the scale you want. So you can go into the scale and you can adjust these to get, a different look. But what if you want to create your own? So that's what I did down here. So when you're creating your own decoratives, it can be any grouping of stitches that you have your start and stop on the same line, right? So here, this is what I drew. I drew a walk stitch, so I'm going to let me turn on the grid so I can see what I'm doing, and I'll draw it again. So I'm going to use a walk stitch, normal, I don't want it. So I'm going to do a small walk stitch, That will give me the spacing between my beads. And then I'm going to do a column to create that, you know, kind of beaded look. If you have something to trace, that often makes it easier than just eyeballing it. I'm ridiculous. I just eyeball everything and adjust it until I'm happy. It's just how I like to work. So I just sit there and play with them, and when I'm happy, good to go. But if you have art, it saves you some monkeying around like I'm doing here. All right, so whenever you get that, well, I have my start point. Now I need another little line here. So I'm going to go create another walk from where, on this same line. Okay, so I've got my 3 points. I've got a line, my bead, and another line. So once you have all that, I can select them all. Right click, save custom shape. I keep on overwriting the same file until I'm happy with it. So I'm going to save it as test, decorative. Okay, yes, I want to replace it. And then when you go to create one, decorative, test. Now I can see how I like. Do I like the look? Do I not? Do I need them further apart? That little spacer line, those sorts of things. So I can play with it until I get the look that I'm going for. Okay, so whether you do it as a walk for your decorative or satin stitches like this, whatever, you can get any look with these decoratives. They're a lot of fun. Decoratives by far are my favorite element. So there was also the question on the same decorative thing was, well, how do you use that for a knockdown stitch, for a primer, similar to that monogram you saw here? So how do you do that decorative fill? Essentially is what they're asking. So I'm going to go open this thing that I drew crazy fast before this webinar. So I just drew a vector so I'd have something to work with. So I figured it might be fun just to go ahead and create the entire design. So I just drew a frame, and then I'm going to turn off the letter. So once you have a frame, I'm going to go create text, and I'm doing this just to get something. So I'm going to type whatever letter you want, change it to the font you want, and change it there, make it larger. If you do this within Illustrator or something like that, or CorelDRAW, you can avoid having to deal with correcting the wireframes, and you'll see what I mean by that, because what I'm going to do now is convert this over to a vector. Okay, so now I've got a vector with a vector. I'm going to take this one, my frame, hold my control key, and select the letter. So I want to subtract a hole out of my vector. So select the first vector I'm going to put a hole in, click on my second, which is what I'm going to subtract it from. Right click on this just to make sure my subtract is set to 0 overlap, which it is. Okay, so now all that did was get me a frame with a hole in it. So now I can go and turn it into a fill. So when you have a vector like this, all you have to do is add a stitch direction, and now you have a fill. All right, well, that's not what we want. We don't want a solid fill. We want that decorative kind of more open look. So if I go into the properties of that, double click, right click, go to properties, which is what you just saw me do there. I can turn off auto, go to decorative, and then there's all kinds of patterns down here. And again, these are the same decorative, so you can create your own. And you create that. And now if I turn this off, you'll see I have a decorative like that, and I can play with my stitch directions. I've got these little handles here, so if you want, oops, all right, gotta get out of the stitch direction first. So with these handles, I can then adjust how each of those, how the pattern is going from row to row, and I can play with them. Okay, so but how you figure that out is just keep playing with it until you get a look you want. So you can create your own decoratives. You can use ones that are built in, and there's a bunch of them, you know, stars. If you want to change the size of it, down here, just like we did before, if you go into the properties, you can go change the size and spacing of everything. Okay. Good morning, Norman on YouTube. Okay. So let's see what else. And like I said, there's a lot of them, and you can just play with all the settings, create your own. I love decoratives. So that's how you would create a patterned fill. Now, just to finish it up, if I want to go and add satin borders around it, I can hold my shift key down. So that's what I did. I selected the shape, held the shift key down, and then clicked on this button here, and that added borders to everything. Okay, so now it's just a matter of cleaning it up, double checking everything, so it's all would be all set to sew. All right, so let's see, what else do we have? Okay, so we talked about that. All right, we did the, oh, this one. What is the purpose of a cross stitch function? So the cross stitch is it's a different look, right? So cross stitch, if you've never done that, is typically done by hand, right? So that particular look is very distinctive. And all that cross stitch feature does for you is it allows you to create your own cross stitch patterns and designs that you can sew out on your machine. So they'll sew out on your embroidery machine and look like that kind of straight X pattern that you're used to seeing with cross stitches. So I've got, just as a quick example, so say, let me turn off the stuff. So, all right, this is a graphic. It's in the graphics folder. So if you select it, you can go right click on the graphic itself, go to cross stitch. You can tell it how many colors you want it to have. You know, you can have it process things different, however you want to do it. Once you're done, it'll go through and process everything and create a cross stitch pattern for you. Okay, you can have it leave the background off or leave the background on, and it's just that look, that X look that you get with cross stitch. Okay, so that's all it does for you. You can of course create your own by using the cross stitch here and drawing yourself, or you can auto generate like you did, like I did here. It's fun to use. I mean, it is a very specific and distinct look, but you know, there's quite a few designs that I've seen out in the wild lately where this seems to be pretty popular in some areas. Okay. So that function is just to give you the ability to easily and quickly create cross-stitch designs. Can you adjust the start and stop in text without converting to a wireframe? Yeah. So I never convert to wireframe when I'm messing with starts and stops. This, where did the letters go that I was playing with? All right. So as a line of text, so if I just select the text, where the green circle is where the entire line starts, and where the red X ends is where the entire line ends. But if I then independently click on each X next to a letter, what you'll see is there's a green circle and a red X on that letter. That's where that particular letter starts and where that particular letter ends. So if you want to move it, you can, you know, further bury your knots by moving these things around. Okay, so let's see. Again, here I can click on the X. There's the green circle where it starts. I can move that. Same with the red X. I can move that around, and it will recalculate the stitches for you to process it so it ends here now instead of over on the end of that letter. And again, you can just click on the circle and drag it. Click on the X and drag it. Okay. What other questions do we have? We answered those two. Can I go over deleting parts of an expanded design? Sure. Let's see. Do we have any questions on YouTube? Oh, you're welcome, Kat, on YouTube. Let's see. Expanded design. Let's go open one of the, oops. I am so cold. Oh my gosh. Even stand it. All right, so C drive, designs, expanded. All right, when you're working with expanded files, I'll say I delete stuff out of expanded files all the time, but it's not my favorite activity to do because it's, you got to pay attention to what you're doing. Okay, so let's say I've got this guy and for whatever reason I want to delete some of these stitches. So first off, you have to select the expanded element that you want to modify. Right here, I can go into expanded editing mode, and now you'll see I can see all the little dots. So I usually use this custom point selection so that I can just draw circles around what I want to delete. Okay, so I can draw circles around it. The points will select. I can hit the delete key, and now they're gone. Okay, so I can then add trims and other things to separate the elements to get rid of the jump stitches that I don't need. See, there's another stitch up here that I missed, so I'd need to go select it and hit delete. So it's a manual process that you basically work your way through, selecting the stitches you want to delete, clicking on them and hitting delete. And it's pretty much that simple, and it works the same way if you want to modify this. So let's say I did not have a wireframe of this because it's expanded, but I want to adjust the shape for whatever reason. Like, let's say, I want when I sew it out, this pull compensation is not how I want it. I want it closer to the border. Well, I can go, select these oops, not all those. See, I caught a few I don't want. So I'd have to deselect them by holding my control key. But now I can shift those points over as a group. And all I'm doing is holding my shift key down on my keyboard and the arrows so that I can nudge them. Okay, you see that entire row of stitches that I had selected moves. So I can either move them or delete stitches the same way. Go through, select whatever I want, or individually one by one, click on something, hit delete. Now, if you click where there's not a dot, notice it adds a dot, it adds a stitch. Okay, so just be cognizant of that. You could be adding stitches inadvertently when you're in this expanded editing mode. Okay, Facebook, I don't see anything yet. YouTube, nope. All right, so let's see. So, that's deleting parts of an expanded design. It's pretty straightforward. Just go through, find that if you have elements that you want to get rid of, select them, delete it. If it's all grouped to one and you only want a certain area, you'd have to select the stitches and delete them from there. Is there a way to save color sequence to the OFM or something so I don't have to enter it each time I load the design? Yeah, you can. I don't do that. So from the OS, so not within DesignShop, but within the OS, once you load it, you can do File, Save, and save the OFM there, and it'll save the settings you have. And then within the OS, you can also tell it to load settings from File. It's a little button on the right hand side under the color change area. There's the F where you flip things. There's another button down there that if you hover over it, it's load settings from File, and you can automatically load whatever was programmed in before there. Okay, so there's a few ways you can do that. Because I don't use that much. I change my threads so often that it's easier for me to make sure I do things right by doing it straight on the machine, but that's just how it works for me. Learning ActiFeed. What ActiFeeding settings are used for which fabrics? So let's see. ActiFeed is, so when you're setting up your design, that's part of, you set it up on the machine, right? The ActiFeed settings, that's how much thread is it going to feed as you're sewing. If you look in your manual, there is a chart. So this chart changes depending on which machine you have. The EMT 16 Plus, this came out of that manual, but so you might want to go to your manual and look at it just to get a starting point. But pretty much what the ActiFeed is saying is how much thread is it going to push for each stitch. When it goes from point A to point B, how much thread do you need? And it, technically it's looking at the thickness of the material, how much is going underneath, how much on top, stitch length, a whole bunch of fun stuff. But I always think of it as the bigger the number, the more thread it's going to feed. The smaller the number, the tighter the thread's going to get. Okay, so if you're sewing on something really thick, I need more thread to be able to get through all of that material, right? To me, that makes sense. I wouldn't try to go through, a 2-inch sandal with a 1/2 inch of thread. My needle, if I were doing that by hand, that'd be near impossible, right? So I'd need more thread. I'd need a higher number. So the higher the number it is, the more thread you get. The lower the number, the tighter the thread gets. So auto, that's what I predominantly use. What you're paying attention to is your minimum preset, because that's how tight is the thread going to go. Whereas if you use the standard right here, that's where you're just setting a flat number and you're telling it, you know, don't adjust anything, just feed the thread. This much, that's all I want. No more, no less, just feed it. Whereas auto, it's going to adjust based on the sewing conditions. All right. As far as what settings should you start with, here's a good start. In general, with the EMT 16 Plus, I start around 4 for most projects and just go up from there. If I notice thread is just so tight, it's pulling down too much into the fabric, it is the thread snapping, up your active feed a little. It's too tight, you're snapping the thread, so you need more thread to avoid that. So it comes as you do projects. A fun thing I always tell folks is to, you know, if something worked really well, make notes of it. You know, for this particular material, these types of threads, this worked. And you'll find that the more you do it, the easier it becomes. I hardly even think about it anymore, but it just, I guess I've been doing it forever. All right. So do we have any other questions? Because, what active feed should I use on nylon? I assume you're talking about the nylon webbings. It really depends on the thickness you're using. I would start probably at 6 or 7 on the 16 on the MT16 Plus. Actually, on any of them, I would start a little bit on the higher side and then also make sure you're hooping that you're sewing your design center out, so that you're not inadvertently moving the webbing around, so that the design starts shifting off the baseline. So that's where I would start on there. Also, when you're sewing on nylon, another trick is to make sure you're using an edge walk and maybe a zigzag underlay. The edge walk will help clean up the edges, because nylon in particular has a really rough texture to it, where you can end up getting where your borders of satin stitches look uneven. By having an edge walk along there, it gives the thread, the top stitching coming over it, something to rest on, rather than just relying on the webbing or that coarse texture. Okay. What other questions do we have? Oh, got a quiet one today. Oh, center out. I haven't tried that. Yeah. So it's not only center out. Like, think of this. If I've got I'm trying to sew 1 foot of lettering on something. All right. And I start over here, particularly nylon webbing, it moves all over the place. You make a stitch and it kind of starts justing around, and next thing you know, you're sewing off in an angle some direction. Well, by doing in sections and sewing center out, you're avoiding dragging the text around. It helps accommodate that better. So if you're doing a foot long, you wouldn't even want to do straight center out. You'd want to do smaller sections as you go, because that'll help avoid having everything shift on you. Gina, yeah, I agree. All right. What other questions do we have? I don't see any. Okay. Oh, even on the fast clamp, yeah, even on the fast clamp, I would still go center out. Like, it's more a function of preventing, shortening the distance that you're giving, that the webbing is going to move, right? So if you're doing 7 inches, by going from one side to the other, you're more likely to have it shift up and go at an angle than if you go center out, because then you only have 3 inches on each side, 3.5 inches on each side. So it's more likely to end up looking straight over the length of the webbing. That's just what I found anyway. All right. What other questions do we have? All right, checking on YouTube. I don't see anything. Oh my goodness. I see my little face in the pictures, and I didn't realize I make such silly faces. Sorry. Okay. Well, that's all I had for the week. Someone had a good question this morning on the Love of Milko site. I think you tagged me right before. Okay, there's more questions being typed in, so let me look at them one at a time. Okay, I wonder if it'd be worth the trouble to base stitch webbing to a tearaway. You can. I don't find it worth the hassle. One thing you'll notice is, particularly on webbing, when you sew into it, if you actually watch the needle go in, you'll see the fibers move, right? So it spreads out. So I just worry if you end up basting it that you're going to end up warping the webbing, so that when you go to sew on it, it's just exacerbating the issue. So I don't know, it might be worth trying just to see, but I don't bother most of the time. Can the way something ties in on a digitizing affect the way it trims on the machine? I have some slingshots, but I feel my settings and active feed are correct. I've not done the upgrade to an EMT 16X, just the 16 plus. All right, so things that you would look at to avoid slingshots on the 16 plus, make sure your bobbin tension is right, that your presser foot isn't too high. That sometimes, if the material's flagging, that it might seem trivial, but by the presser fit being a little high, your material flag, which causes it to move during the trim. So you might have slingshots and other things occurring that way. If your active feed is too low, it can end up popping your thread, again, causing it to, at the trim, causing it to slingshot out. So maybe upping 1 point on your active feed might help. Bobbin tension, of course. Trying to think what else. Bobbin tension, active feed, your presser foot. And the tie-ins, I don't find it changes how it trims. It really is more settings and making sure everything's appropriate on the machine. Now, if there are no knots, that's another thing, because then you can end up getting loops and other weird things. Can you be more specific about how to do stitching center out in sections? Sure. Where's my software? New. Okay, so let's say if I were doing the whole word, I could do center out and then just set it to be center out, and that'll sew just center out, right? Now, what if I wanted to do back and forth, like A, M, N, A, T, bouncing around? That's a little silly for the length of this. But in those cases, what I would do anyway, is digitize everything how I want, and then either break it apart. I'm trying to think what would be the easiest. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. So if I converted it to wireframe, then what I could do is give everything different colors, and this is just so I can easily change, rearrange them. Okay. So now I can, oops, I still have too many blues. Forgot about that one. Black. Nope, we already used that. There we go. All right, so let's say I want my A to sew first, left click, drag it up, then I'd want the N, then the M, which is this color, so that would be after there, and you would just rearrange them into whatever order you want it to sew out in. Okay, so if you have multiple words, you can actually, rather than converting to wireframe, so all right, rather than converting it to wireframe, I could just go duplicate my element, delete the T off that one, and then delete the Sam off the other, alternate to keep it there. I can go into the properties here, tell that one to be center out. So now this one will be center out, and then also the T. Okay, so it's, yeah, my T needs to go, where's my Sam? There it is. So Sam, center out, and then the T. Okay, so there's there's so many ways to do it. It's a personal preference and what works best for you. Okay, let's see. Any on YouTube? Oh, so saving a file in OS will keep the positioning in the file exactly where it is as well. Yes, but everyone hoops different. So just, yeah, you can save the file. That'll save the settings and everything. But when you hoop, generally people don't hoop perfect every time. So it's still worth having adjustment where you're going to move the hoops around. But yeah, it'll save the settings for you. All right, nothing there. Okay. What other questions do we have? I don't see any. I'll give it a second because the minute I was almost done last time, like 3 questions were typed in. Well, let's see. Next week, I didn't even look. Are we doing this next week? Next week is Christmas, so I don't know if they want me to do it early or skip next week. I'll have to ask the Melco guys, but we'll post and let everyone know what we're doing. Okay. All right. Well, that is all I had for the day. I hope you guys are having a great holiday season, staying busy. I'm too busy. I'm ready for a break. So it's time for the year to be done. Start a new year. This one needs to be over. All right. Well, I hope these will helpful. Make sure you type in any questions. You can email applications@melco.com, and we'll try to get any questions you have added on to the next time we do this. So until next time, my name's Samantha, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.